Let's start also because we have our colleagues online as well that will not necessarily follow the discussion on the corridor and during coffee break. So thank you very much and welcome back to the Global Food Security Cluster meeting. This is the third day. It will be an half day, as you have seen in the agenda. My name is Davide Rossi. I'm part of the Global Food Security Cluster team. Today, I will chair this half day with a big responsibility after these two excellent chairs, Regine and Julie. They did a great job yesterday and before yesterday. Unfortunately, our SAG members couldn't join, so they couldn't chair this meeting that normally our SAG are requested and happy to chair. So that will be me today, but I wanted also to acknowledge the work of Peter and Joe who are following online. So welcome and thank you. Just a quick note or reflection on yesterday achievements and discussion. I think that we have been throughout the different working group and group discussions. So starting with the strategy, we really thank you very much because it was very important for us to really, after the survey we have done online, but to really discuss with all of you in the different, let's say, pillars or topics that we have built up in this meeting. Also, thanks to the suggestion given through the survey. And I think discussion were very rich, were very important also for us to start to think about what need to be changed from last strategy and to the new one, and the key issues that we need to look into the next 3 years, because that will be a 3-year strategy. So this is a very initial stage of the process I was explained yesterday, and this discussion will be the base of the new strategy. Today, after this meeting, we are going to have a SAG meeting, also face-to-face, also to start to build up on the input we received, and we'll let you know what are going to be the next steps that they were highlighted yesterday briefly. So thanks a lot for that. I think all the 5 groups had a great outcome, and we saw from the presentation, the back to plenary. And also, we really, let me say that, enjoy also the richness of the discussion because we are all very senior technical people on food security, but we also come with different background with our cluster coordinators, the NGO colleagues, UN agencies that have joined, and the area of responsibilities as well. Let's call them our cluster colleague in any case. And so that was great. And it was really the base of our discussion, and the richness of the cluster is to have a mix of this, very different people that we need for build up a new strategy of food security. So after that, we had the working group. And again, I think some of you, many of you, maybe they joined for the first time. I think some discussion, they were a bit also maybe brainstorming, bringing new ideas. I think this is not bad. It's the work of our chairs and our focal point now to put into a better structure. But I think it was important because this is also what we wanted to have, like to have participation in the working group, to bring new idea. Also, we don't have to be what we used to be 3 years ago before the COVID and what we have been in the last years, unfortunately, online. So that was very important. And we'll have a report to plenary from the working group chairs and focal point in a little. So let me go on to the agenda. So today we'll start with Sean and Jan from Agriculture Working Group to report to plenary, and Aftab from the Cash Working Group reporting to plenary as well on discussion we had yesterday and the way forwards. Then we are going to have the first session. We have 2 sessions today. The first is the launch of SEADS handbook. Someone who was part of the Agriculture Working Group yesterday already grabbed some books, but the presentation is today. So we'll have a session dedicated to that, and we are very happy to host that in the last day of the Global Partner Meeting. And after a coffee break, we'll have a second session, which will be led by our colleague Gwen, on the global network against food crisis, an update and achievements and what is coming in the next for this group. And with that will be supported also by our cluster coordinators. I think Guy will be there, and Leslie maybe, or the HDPN specialist from Nigeria, and Isaac, I believe, right, from South Sudan, who is the co-facilitator from South Sudan. So thank you very much. Then last but not least, we'll have an evaluation. It's going to be quick, online, thanks to Walter, who prepared it as well. I think it's very important for us that you give us the feedback, because it's also the first meeting after so many meetings that we had online. We had a hybrid event, which sometimes is difficult to organize, but we try to have participation from all of the angle of the world, especially those that cannot join us here for visa or other reasons. Okay, so evaluation, and then final wisdom from Marielle and Abdul Majid, the two cluster coordinators. So I think we can start if there is no any burning issue that you would like to raise. Okay, so I give you then the word to who would like to start, Aftab or Sean or Jan? Agriculture or cash? Okay, then we start with agriculture. So Jan and Sean together, or you can...
I'm going to kick it off, and then Jan will fill in gaps. And I also invite, of course, people who were present in the rather lively discussion yesterday to fill in any gaps I might have missed. So we had a good attendance, I think roughly about 40 people, including those online, maybe more than 40, to discuss the agricultural working group. And it was more of a brainstorm at first, highlighting areas, but that the agricultural working group could focus on to align with the developing strategic goals of the food security cluster. And I'll just highlight about 6 of the areas that were discussed, and these are all need to be refined and further developed as action points, bearing in mind what the agricultural working group and what the cluster itself can do as a group, rather than what needs to be done in the sector more widely. One of them was following along what the working group has been doing so far, is really to share and coordinate evidence and strategies. So to look at tools and standards that could be shared, perhaps trying to structure that as one suggestion in a more organized way, either at the country level or through thematic areas in a catalog to make it more accessible. But there's an awful lot of information and guidance that could be facilitated and shared more concretely. A second area related to that was on experience, and really this was discussed in a way of both constructive of, how do you do something, but also in terms of talking more frankly, perhaps at the country level or at other levels, around challenges different organizations face in implementing certain things. So a more frank format of discussion, but that was broadly under the heading of experience, both of particularly looking at how we can have a better process for sharing experience than just a sort of passive lecture format. A third area that was highlighted several times was around country, particularly at the country level, for country-specific technical support, perhaps on request, but around areas of coordination for example, around kits, guidance, more very specific technical guidance for what might be packages of support that could be appropriate for certain areas for quick response. So this is linked to anticipatory action, as well as to being able to preparedness more generally, so that some of the agricultural working group could, some members in the discussion yesterday expressed a desire to have that information ready at an earlier stage, so that everyone's not reinventing the wheel. A fifth area was broadly around evidence and advocacy, and those two, they overlap a bit. Some, perhaps maybe others will say those are two separate themes, but advocacy to highlight much more firmly around livelihoods, around anticipatory action, and responses appropriately for before, during, and after. So the what role the agricultural working group can do on that. And another area was really on, and there was a lot of discussion on this, on guidance for transition. So how far transition between emergency, you could say early response, and resilience, to use one framing, to say that there's more scope for guidelines and technical ways to, guidelines on technical responses to help on this transition. And I should say, to be fair, there was some caution about that and how far, expressed by some, on how far an agricultural working group or the cluster should move beyond emergency response into a much broader and more diffuse area of resilience and development more generally. And then finally, discussions around commitment and engagement, to say what needs to be focused on to make sure that there's active participation in the agricultural working group, that it's basically filling a need, that it's adding value, because if it isn't, then frankly, perhaps we should put our time in something different. And so that also means, how the working group itself functions to make sure that we're engaging with members and that members are engaging with that, and be realistic about people's time constraints. So it goes both ways. So as I said, I'm just sketching out the areas. It's not as if we came up with tons of solutions for those, though there were some that were discussed, and we'll try to summarize that, but it's given a fairly large area for reflection. Jan, do you have anything to add, please?
No, I think you covered it very well, but if anyone that was in the meeting yesterday feels that we left out some area that they wanted to highlight, feel free to do that. Thank you.
Maybe to add, I think for me, it became very clear that we all in the group, we had very different understanding of what the group could or should do. And I think it was all valid. All the points that were raised were really valid, but for me, it's a big question of what is realistic? What can a group really do? And what should a group do? We can, of course, get lost in very small detailed things, or are we working more at the bigger picture, at a higher level? I think that will be a challenge for the group over the coming months, to keep that balance, to really, as you said, like meeting the needs of the people, and through this making sure that people are really feeling they want to participate and they contribute, and it's worth the time they are spending on the group, by looking what they get out. So that will be a very tricky one to balance, I see.
Yes, and maybe to complete, reminding that what Kate was presenting in the working group yesterday on the different modalities that we have been using to work on this group in the last years. I think that could be one of the solutions, is to have smaller task force with a concrete output in mind, and then a few people gathering because they are interested in the topic, because they know they are available to work on that for, let's say, 2-3 months on a limited time. And that is what has been working very well in the last years, not only on the agriculture working group, but also we have the example of the COVID-19 working group. So when you define a clear objective, a clear outcome that you want to reach with a task force, you then define the participants that have time and technicalities to do it, and it was working very well. So that's one of the solutions. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Sean, for a good summary of at times a bit confusing discussion yesterday. I think we also discussed a bit the importance of the working groups aligning to the priorities of the global food security cluster, because the last 2 days we talked about what should be our strategy for 2023 to 2025. And if that's one thing and the working groups are focusing on something else, that would be not so good. And I think we also discussed a little bit on the presentation that Alice did on the findings from her survey on the first day. And she came with some clear recommendations to us. What should we focus on? So it's also, we put had some discussions around that, and it's captured partly in what you are presenting. So the discussion was very wide, and it's a good thing to be summarizing that into 6 points.
Anyone else wants to come in for the agriculture? Yes, Mark, please.
To know how many clusters activated that has a working group for agriculture. That'd be good to know the scope of the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for this question that I should know the answer, but now we did this exercise last year. I think we had around 15, if I'm not wrong. But I have to say that sometimes it's difficult to monitor because in some countries they have agriculture working group or different working groups that are on and off. Let's say also, you know, for ad hoc issues, technical support and so on. But this is one of the things that maybe didn't come up yesterday too much, but the linkage with the agriculture working group at field level and with the coordinators that sometimes I think most of the time are different than the cluster coordinators, even if they report to the cluster, would be something that we would need to strengthen and to maybe also engage much more on that. And for this, thanks for this reminder. And also we count on your support when we reach the agriculture working group technical coordinators.
I think, you know, like Sean, you mentioned that there is a lot of expectations maybe from partners, and sometimes partners directly reach to us with some expectations as well. And I was surprised that there are a few things that we're not even aware that it's already available. And I think you have covered it very well, that there are guidelines sometime available, but we don't know about it. So how we can make it more visible? Like on the drought, it was my question, and it was already there. And then there was a question from, I think, Care International on the guidelines in South Sudan. And I remember that we have produced it. I was there in 2014 when we produced it. So it's already there. Like 9 years ago, it was produced, but yesterday it was demanded again to have those guidelines. So that's one thing that that's already very well covered, that how we can, you know, make these guidelines or some of the important stuff more visible. And the second thing that I would really like to say for even Kesh and Markets Working Group as well, that at the end of the day, please remember that we will be coordinating. Okay, so even if you want to develop some guidelines, we need to have strong technical people dedicated from your organizations to come together, like Julie was mentioning, to produce those guidelines. We can provide the secretariat facility, bringing everyone together, coordinating it, try to coordinate it in a better way. And once the products are ready, try to get everyone's say on it to have a sign-off sort of thing, and then communicating it widely to the people so that they can use it. So that's what we can do. But still, the major chunk of the work that is actually on the guideline, for example, we will not be doing, you know, if you agree that we need to develop guidelines on fisheries and emergencies, in our team, there is no one who can do it. So then if you need it, then you need to really work together to bring the right people and those coordination forum, so that they can work together to produce it for a larger benefit of everyone. So whenever you are deciding about your work plan, please keep it in your mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to ask you actually, if it would be also possible, no, you don't want to make the question discussed too bright, but I'm wondering if it would be possible to maybe add some information on the horticulture approach, because I think in many countries where we have issues with the internal displacement or with the right to land, it is actually a burning issue. And it would be extremely useful and helpful for these countries to have some more guidelines. Thank you.
No, thanks. I mean, that is a very good concrete example. I mean, there were other ones mentioned about fisheries or livelihoods more broadly, but that was discussed as well yesterday, and specifically about vegetable and livelihoods, that there's, you know, that's an area that could be ring fenced, or, well, encircled a bit more for guidance. Thanks.
Great, thanks a lot, Sean. Thanks also for your leadership together with Jan. And so we still have a lot of work to do to frame it well, but for sure under each of the component that Sean just mentioned, we'll need to prioritize some areas, technical areas of support. And again, a very good point from our colleague from NRC on the strategy. So we all agreed that the working group will support the strategy and the new strategy. It will be, you know, the operational also harm of that. Thanks a lot for that. So with that, I think it's your turn after. So on the cash working group, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I think as I had pitched yesterday that we are one of the active working groups. So I think we had a great meeting with participants around 24 from this room and 17 online, including one of our co-chairs and also GFSC team member, Damian. So I think it was a great meeting. We discussed about achievements, which maybe I would like to just run through it. The key achievements which we had was largely is we are undertaking a research now with Key Aid Consulting, and it is under GFSC. Let me remind, it is also supported by some partners, including CRS and Plan, but it is under the banner of GFSC, and it is being conducted by Key Aid Consulting. It is largely the evidence review on the use of cash transfers in the context of accused food security, and it is being undertaken in Somalia, Syria, and Nigeria. And even in one of our cluster coordinators, Mohi, has been very, very supportive of this from Syria. And also the key member agencies, it's now from different agencies have been supporting in different countries as well with the research. And at the time, the key informal interviews are being conducted. And hopefully we'll have the report by January, which will be shared with the group, and it will be signed off by GFSC. So that is one of the products which is coming up. It is underway, and I think it has. We are looking forward to the results of that. How we come out with the findings, especially on cash and voucher, but largely it is focusing on cash. Then we also had provided some inputs from the GFSC, this working group, to the Eco Cash policy as well. That was something which we did in the last 1 year. And it was led by Ruko and Corey in the last when they were co-chairs. And then we had an election last year, no, this year actually, early March, when I and Corey took over from Ruko and Corey, and Corey continued. And then we also reviewed the TORs, because, you know, when we had this 2 years gap, it was a virtual platform where this COVID-19 context, and earlier we used to focus more on the products, like what products we're producing from these working groups, especially for the cluster coordinators. But in the virtual context, it was possible, but again, not in the way which we were doing in the face-to-face time. But still we produced some documents. I and Julie were involved from Cash and Market Working Group, so through the technical working group under Objective 2 of COVID-19. And I think we produced around 4 to 5 documents, which is there on the website of GFSC. And I would urge colleagues to look at it instead of going for the new documents, which Majid was mentioning, that no need to reinvent the wheel. If we have documents there, maybe there is a need to update, we can update. But but otherwise, the resources are there. And then we also provided inputs on the multi-purpose cash outcome indicators. I think this working group contributed with very good inputs into that, which was published recently. And then yesterday in the discussion, we had a series of discussions and we came up with a work plan. Of course, we have a big wish list, but to be honest, it is not possible to achieve in the next 6 months to a year, but we will prioritizing it. We have the likes of anticipatory action through cash-based programming, maybe to connect with the financial service providers, because that is coming up to go with more of the digital platform. And then there is also a lot of discussions on this. There has been inflation and also especially how do we go for cash transfers when there is high inflation, and sometimes I think a colleague shared that when we provide cash, supposedly the example of Bangladesh, it has a local inflation for a certain period of time. How do we address those? So maybe we need to have some tools for that, but there are tools existing and which we can have a look and redesign or adapt it. Also, there was suggestion to have cash for community as well. Something around nutrition sensitive programming to review the MEB, that is minimum expenditure basket, which was produced by CALP. There was a presentation from CALP yesterday on this. And it has also been discussed that as the working group, we have also contributed to this guideline before. I think Ruko and Corey, they contributed to this guideline. And if there is a need to adapt, I think we can review it and it can be contextualized for our cluster coordinators in the field and also the partners as well, member agencies. There was also a bit of need to exchange more on sharing CVA, information sharing as well. And there was a big discussion, I think took a lot of time to how to link with humanitarian cash and social protection. And this was also being linked to the SPIAC-B, that is a working group, the Social Protection Interagency Coordination Board. Who had a meeting recently in October in Ankara. There was a big conference and where even I and some colleagues from this room were also participated in that meeting workshop. And there was a big push that how we link this with different cash working groups. And again, as this working group, there is absolutely no need to again come up with a new tool. So maybe we can signpost some of the guidelines which is being produced by SPIAC-B or which will be produced in future. And that can also be linked with the cash coordination, that is Global Cash Advisory Group. So it has to be synchronized at all levels. And there was also discussion that how we map the existing evidences from different countries, especially on social protection, and align the humanitarian cash with the social protection values, and share good practices. And also discussion was also done on the nexus approach, like when humanitarian cash is phased out, how do we link with the longer term support or interventions through cash? And that's where the nexus comes in. I think there were a series of these discussions were there. This is a big wish list, but again, we will be going back to the members again through an email and on selecting the priorities, because we couldn't prioritize yesterday because we had a hybrid mode where we had people in the face-to-face and also in the online. So I think we have taken down, and thanks to Damien who has captured all these points. And then we will be going back to the partners and we'll be coming up soon with our priorities and we'll be sharing with the GFSC before the finalization of the report. I think this is it from my side, and there is also a feedback. It's also an evidence that several of our colleagues who couldn't participate in this working group. This is largely due to the reason is that our colleagues couldn't, including one of our co-chairs, Corey and Damien was in deployment, but again, other colleagues from other agencies couldn't participate because we earlier had a pattern or a template, like there was a dedicated day for working group meetings. Like the first day and the next 2 days was GFSC meeting. And in that, there were several working group meetings and people had the choice to participate in one or more working groups. Even personally, I would like to participate in another working group as well, like maybe agriculture working group or maybe program quality. And now it is being limited. So if I'm attending the cash and market working group, I'm not able to attend the other working group and vice versa. So it's a suggestion, it's a request as well, that maybe you can have a dedicated day for working groups so that we can have a ample time to discuss the key issues. And yesterday we could feel, even though we had 2.5 hours, it was still short because there were a lot of discussions coming up, and we are meeting after 3 years, and there were 70% were a new crowd. So so a lot of things were there to discuss, but maybe it will be good to have a review and a reflection that how we can go back to that, so that people who should be coming here, they couldn't come, and they can come in future as well. I think this is a reflection from me and from my team who are there. And I think I'll stop here. Please feel free to compliment if I've missed out something, the colleagues who were there yesterday. And for the working group and the contact list is on the slide. You can see we are co-chairs, 2 co-chairs. One is Corey and from CRS, and other is me. And then we have the support from Damian from the JFSA team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aftab. The floor is open for question on the last point and the suggestion on the structure of the working group meeting. I'll come back on that, but please, colleague. Also, Walter, if there is any comment online, just let us know. Thank you very much. Sarka, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to ask you if there is actually a new role of the Global Food Security Cluster Cash Working Group in the transition of the global transition of all cash working groups towards OCHA. Thank you.
Thanks for that. We had a discussion on this yesterday, and we did provide an update on cash advisory group. Incidentally, I and Rami represent the Global Cash Advisory Group. We did explain that there will be a transition, and the transition is divided into 3 parts. One is 0 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, and 12 to 18 months. And different FAQs, frequently asked questions, and also the presentations are being prepared for that, so that first of all, we have a smooth transition. Of course, there is overwhelming situation among the working groups. For example, like yesterday, Rami mentioned that there is a big chaos now, or thinking going on among the coordinators, that is it at the cost of our job? Like if there is a transition, especially the agencies or the co-chairs who are working with NGOs, they think that, okay, are we going to lose our job if this new transition comes in? And then if the new transition comes in, what is the new capacity coming in? Third is, who is providing support? All these questions. So we are documenting all these questions. We will be coming up with the FAQs, and there has been assurance that it is not at the cost of our existing jobs, which is there, but there will be transition into the like how we go for the coordination, and also there will be certain procedures and methods for the election as well. So it is coming up, but it's a bit of time. It's a time-taking process, but let me say it is very, very demanding as well. Like it is taking much of our time. Like every week we have a meeting. Almost my time, I'm contributing around 10 to 15% of my time on this. It's very hectic, and it is also, we are accountable with a tight deadline to report back to the principals. So we had one deadline we met in September, but again, it is coming up in January as well. So hopefully it will be smooth, but of course there will be some challenges. Nothing is possible without a challenge. Thank you.
Any other input for the group? Otherwise, just my comment on what you mentioned. So I think what Aftab mentioned, and we just discussed briefly yesterday, is that before in Global Partners meeting, we used to have a 1 day dedicated to the working group, where also the working group were not in parallel, but in order for all of the participants to participate to different working groups, it was a good opportunity to have it. This time we choose to have another shape also because of logistics. But if this is something that you will like to see and have more space for the working group, a dedicated day, we are open to that. And please, when we also are going to have the evaluation at the end, there will be a box for suggestions. formally, but also informally, you can reach us just after the meeting, and it is important that to hear your view on that as well. Okay. Okay, great. Thanks again, after, and thanks to also Corey and Damien and Jan and Sean for the agriculture working group. And maybe the thing that was not mentioned is also that the two working group should also talk to each other when possible, when there are some commonalities. I saw one of the topic you have mentioned is inflation, and I think also in the agriculture working group yesterday, there was a point on a global increase of prices for agriculture tools and input. So it's important that we are also linked together, right?
Thanks,
Please.
Davide. I think, and that makes sense. We need to talk, and that's why we had that one day, we were also trying to discuss among the working groups, like what are the things we need to coordinate, and also we had some intercluster working groups earlier as well. So maybe this is the first time we're meeting, maybe that they will follow suit and they will come soon as well. Thank you.
Great. Mark, yeah.
Just raise your attention on this transition that you talk about. I think if the cost is too high, I think it's the role maybe from the cluster, to take kind of strong position to move from that. We are in the mid of the big inflation with huge demand on cash working group to be strong and to provide guidance. And I think if this is at the cost of some major risks that we feel that the sector may face, it's better that we address that. DRC is a good example because it's a very big country, many players, where there is a clear need for guidance and orientation and decision, including for the HRP. I don't know why, but there's nobody actually for the cash coordination in DRC. So the two guys that were there, they moved to Ukraine, and we have no guidance for the MEB for 2024-23. So basically the food security cluster push to have some orientation, but this should be somewhere, linked to the overall architecture of coordination. So we are not happy so far about the way OCHA is addressing the cash working group, and I think this should be put on your attention at high level. Thank you.
Thank you. Well noted on this point. So, we have one intervention here before.
Sorry, it's me, David. Hi, this is Mohit.
Okay, wait, we have our colleague here before, then yourself. I know that when now you mention OCHA and you want to jump, Sarka want to jump, but
thank you. This is Christina Pio from the GBV AOR. My question, especially to the agriculture working group, relates to how the group plan to engage with some of the regional bodies, such as IGAD, for example, that works quite a lot on food security and agriculture production. For example, early last year, IGAD actually held a high-level event on addressing food securities in the context of humanitarian development and peace nexus in East Africa and the Horn of Africa region. So how are we prepared to actually take advantage of such opportunities, especially if you're talking of transition, but also reflecting back on the discussions on day one, which focus on working within the humanitarian and development peace nexus? Thank you, Anova.
I can take this one if you allow me, or just because on IGAD we have our colleague from the FSN working group in the region in Kenya that are actually I think the working group is co-chaired by IGAD, if I'm not wrong, and we have quite continuous discussion with them, especially on various areas, including the monitoring of the situation for the region in terms of famine and so on. On the technical side, we had few presentations also from them in the past global partners meeting, but also in the working group before related to the locust and then to the drought. So we have an engagement. But for sure, it's an area that we can improve as well with IGAD. But thank you very much for raising that. Also in our website, there are also a bit of the presentation that we have done in the group, so you will find also IGAD, if I remember well. Yeah, okay, thank you. So back to Sark and then Moye. Please brief, because we are a bit over schedule. Thank you.
No, it's just to join Mark and to ring on the bell on this issue of the transition of cash working groups to OCHA. I mean, in case of Burkina Faso, the transition was not done yet. Was not finalized yet. The cash working group is still with WFP, but actually hosting the cash call person. However, over now, the cash working group is basically executing or directly orders from the humanitarian coordinator, who has obviously his her proper agenda. So it's extremely worrying to see the switch of the cash working group and on the also neutrality of the cash working group towards the OCHA agenda. So yeah, thank you.
Hi, Rami, CRS, and also on the CAG. The thing about the transition is, even after the transition is delivered, and even like when the guidance is done and the transition, the overall responsibility of cash coordination stays within the context themselves. So you are not to wait. So nobody is supposed to wait for the transition or put things on hold. Or if you have a gap, there are the existing channels that you have to cover these gaps, and you have to be ringing the bell. But the CAG is not stepping in to directly intervene in things that are dealt with at context level. So this should be very clear. So if you have a gap in coordination, for sure, I mean, I hear it and we will take it back. But again, the overall responsibility for each context is within the country. So it has to go through the existing humanitarian architecture. The CAG is not there to overlap that setup. Thank you.
Thanks. Let me just compliment what Rami said. I think that is very clear. That's what I was going to say.
Maybe shall we take the last one?
Okay.
So you will close the session, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. Moye, please, very quick.
No, I was going to say it's covered mostly, but just saying, and second, what Marco and Sarka said, now the transition also is not happening in Syria, but just saying now most of the humanitarian fund also coming to concentrate on the multi-sectorial or cash and BCA, right? And I think with the cash working group also, we still have this not functioning fully. Maybe re-echo that this need of really like clear guidance. It comes when we have a cash working group, or sorry, OCHA operates in terms of the cash modality or intervention, but also the role of the food security still some part you kind of taking the biggest part of it. Of guiding partners and also dealing with the feedback, but this is not actually written anywhere. So we kind of doing like many of the functions as coordinators and also guidance to partners. But I think in the transition also it's important maybe at the global also level, and also when this conversation happen, so at country level can back us up. And okay, so let's put these lines or let's say recommendations just to guide that transition later on. Otherwise, this could also cause some confusion with partners, and then we can get to some level of operational confusion. But on the OCHA, like other colleagues covered, so I don't want to say anything else. Thanks.
Thank you very much. After, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mohi. That's very interesting. I will not comment anything on OCHA or WFP or any other agency. I think these things are bound to come when you move to a new system. Challenges will be there. But to be honest, I'm not the one who can assure everything will be right, but things are in the progress. And just to complement what Rami said, I think thanks for bringing these points, first of all. I think this can feed to the frequently asked questions, like these are the issues, these are the scenarios. How do we deal with that in future? And again, maybe we can be the link to take these questions. And also I would urge that maybe if you have more questions, please share with us, and we can take these questions as a real scenario and come out with a potential solution for that. And second, on this transition, I think as Rami mentioned, CAG is not the one who we can only just advise, but it's the country who takes the decision there. And again, that's the message which we're getting, is that there will be no administrative change at the moment. And I think it will be slow process, smooth process, so that It doesn't dismantle the operations and the response which we're doing at the moment. Second, as you mentioned, the case of DRC, there is nothing at the moment. Maybe it will be good to take up with the country. At the same time, we will try to do a bit of advocacy, like how best we can strengthen. At the same time, since you are also one of our, what do you say, a clone in the field from Cash and Market Working Group under GFSC, it will be good to have some more discussion that how we can come out with some potential solution and how best we can support each other. That is what I can say at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Aftab, and thanks colleagues for your input. Very relevant. Now let's close this session.
Just
No.
last, sorry, 30 seconds. The presentation on this new cash coordination, just Rami updated me, it has been released, so we will share with that, how it looks like. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Aftab. So let's close the session on the working group. And let's open the next session, which is the SEADS handbook launch. So we're very happy to have to host this session. So let me introduce you the speakers, starting from Kate. So Kate is the Senior Technical Advisor for Emergency and Resilient Seed System at CRS. Then we have Katie, who is the Livestock Emergency Guidelines and Standards, LEGS, in a nutshell, responsible and very also active both in the Agriculture Working Group. Thanks for that. We have Isaac, who is the co-facilitator for the South Sudan cluster from World Vision, and Sean, who is the FAO representative for SEADS. And last but not least, Ristan Hale, that I can't remember your title, unfortunately, because there was a last minute change in the agenda. So I'm sorry for
So
that.
Head of Communications and Learning Services for SPEAR Standard.
Thank you, sorry for that. And thanks also for joining this session. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Davide, and morning, everyone. As Davide said, I'm Kathy Watson. I'm the LEGS coordinator, and I'm very happy to be here today to officially launch the newest member of the Humanitarian Standards Partnership, SEADS. Could we have the first couple of slides, please? I'll keep talking while they're coming up. And the next one, please. Thank you. As a member of the SEADS Standards Steering Group, I would like to say thanks for the opportunity to hold this launch during the Global Partners meeting. It's great to have the chance to share this with you today. Next slide, please. As a member of the Humanitarian Standards Partnership myself, I'm very pleased that SEADS has now become a partner. SEADS fills a critical gap in the standards that are available to humanitarians and development practitioners around the world. And will be a great companion, in particular to LEGS, because as you know, a lot of livestock keepers also produce crops. With the addition of SEADS, the HSP has now 9 complementary standards, which you can see on the slide, that humanitarian actors can turn to for program design, implementation, and evaluation to enable the best possible response in an emergency. And this newest one should be easy to dive into because it has the same structure and format and foundations as the other HSP standards. Next. Developing these standards has been a truly collaborative effort. Hundreds of individuals and dozens of organizations around the world have helped in a variety of ways, as steering group and field team members contributing evidence, reviewing and commenting on the draft, and participating in simulation events. When you dig into the book, you'll find that it reflects collective wisdom of the literature and field-tested knowledge. Next, we've already been introduced to the speakers, so I'm going to start next, please, with Sean, who's going to give us more information and the background to the SEADS standards. We'll take questions after all the panel members have spoken, but if you're online, please start to put any questions you may have into the Q&A box as we go along. So over to Sean. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Kathy. Next slide, please. Actually, 2 slides ahead. But while we're doing that, then I've been Next slide, please. Oh, thanks. And the next one, please. Thank you.
The next one.
Yeah. Yes, that's fine. Thank you. I've been providing technical support to the SEAD standards steering group for the last 2 years, and I'm delighted, obviously, like everyone, to be meeting in person, and very excited that this is the moment we're actually launching the SEAD standards. So I'm briefly going to walk you through the SEADS handbook, but in 5 minutes. Next slide, please. So what is SEADS? The SEAD standards. They're a set of evidence-based international principles and minimum standards to support the design, implementation, and evaluation of crop-related responses. So these are to allow you to determine if a crop-related response is appropriate, necessary, or feasible. It helps you prioritize which response area may achieve livelihood objectives given the context. It helps you track alignment of your project with the SEADS minimum standards and the core humanitarian standards, and provides tools for measuring impact from crop-related crisis responses. Next slide, please. As Kathy mentioned, the SEADS handbook is the newest member of the Humanitarian Standards Partnership. This is a collaboration among standards initiatives to harness evidence, expert opinion, and best practices, and to use this knowledge to improve quality and accountability of humanitarian response. Next slide, please. Now, SEADS fills a major gap in humanitarian standards by providing guidance specific to crop production before, during, and after emergencies. As you know very well, crop production is key for food income and rural livelihoods around the world, and millions of people who depend on crop production are vulnerable to crises, especially as most of the very poorest people live in rural areas. So during a crisis, crop production and its many associated services that make crop production possible could be disrupted, and this makes it more difficult for people to meet their food and income needs. Many of you know this very well and have seen this firsthand, of course. So using SEADS minimum standards can help project programming use the best approaches to prevent hunger from increasing or people from adopting negative coping practices. Crop-related crisis responses that use the SEADS principles and standards offer people assistance that can have sustained livelihood impacts. And responses that are aligned with the SEADS principles and standards can help reduce the impact of future crises and support a more sustainable use of natural resources and enhance linkages to market systems and viability. Next slide, please. Anyone who's involved in the crop-related responses can use SEADS, but it's most useful for agricultural experts who are unfamiliar with humanitarian principles, programming and evaluations, or conversely for humanitarians who are less familiar with crops and effective programming to support crop-based livelihoods before, during, and after emergencies. Next slide, thanks. SEADS principles are fundamental concepts that underpin all crop-related responses and support the best possible programming. They build on SEADS standards, evidence-based, livelihood-based, and rights-based approach, and complement the humanitarian charter, the protection principles, and the core humanitarian standards, which are the foundations of SEADS. By highlighting concepts that ensure crop production has livelihood benefits. These principles apply in all humanitarian contexts and should be considered in all types of crop-related responses. The 5 principles are: use livelihoods programming, use a participatory approach in all aspects of crisis response, commit to preparedness and early action, consider climate change and minimize environmental impacts, and finally, establish coordinated responses. SEADS includes 5 sets of minimum standards that cover initial assessment, 3 crop-related response areas, and impact-oriented monitoring and evaluation. These 5 minimum standards were selected using an approach that focused on evidence, livelihoods, and rights. They're guided by a systematic review of over 250 evaluations of crop-related responses in humanitarian crises, as well as feedback from hundreds of experts around the world, some of whom are in this room, during our global public consultations in 2021. The standards are based on a livelihoods approach because crop-related crisis response supports livelihoods and a rights approach that encourages participation, empowerment, accountability, and non-discrimination when delivering responses. Next slide. The guidance and practical tools, and this is very much at the heart of the SEADS standards, are in initial assessment. The minimum standards support assessment, design, and response identification for crop-related responses. SEADS response areas identification tool will help direct you to choose one or more response areas. These could be SEADS and SEAD systems, tools, equipment, and other non-SEAD inputs, or crop-related infrastructure. Once you select the response area and the relevant technical options within that area, you'll want to consider the minimum standards for impact-oriented monitoring and evaluation. These impact-oriented standards provide guidance and tools for participatory approaches to evaluation, designing project objectives, impact indicators, and different types of impact evaluations. For each of the 3 response areas, SEADS includes tools to help you achieve the minimum standards in each area. These tools include decision trees. Next, please. Timing tables. Next, please. And tables of disadvantages and advantages of different technical options in each response area. Next, please. We don't have time to cover all the standards in this short introduction, but I just want to finish by sharing how you can get access to explore them yourselves. As you know, access to information is critical to all the producers we assist, and also to all of you here in this room and online today. Minimum standards cannot guide the best possible programming if they're not accessible. Like other HSP minimum standards, inclusion is a core value for SEADS, so it was designed to be freely available, easy to use, and understandable by everyone. The easiest way to get a copy is to download it for free from the SEADS website, and the link is there at the top of that slide. You can view or search SEADS alongside other HSP minimum standards on the HSP website, or download the HSP app and take SEADS with you in the field. But if you're like me and you like a good hard copy of the book, and those who are here in the room, you can take a copy at the end of the panel today, one of these. And as I think we've said, 1 per organization, please. We have limited print run at the moment. But in future, you'll be able to purchase as many as you want through practical action. So links to all of these options will be available on the SEADS website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. Now we're going to hear from the other panelists about what SEADS means for their organizations and how they expect to use it. So let's start with Tristan from Sphere. Thanks, Tristan.
Thank you, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be here for the SEADS launch and also for the global partner meeting. It's been really nice to make some new connections here. I'm going to start my presentation with a very short history of the last 25 years. Next slide, please. So Sphere itself started in 1997, and between 2008 and 2015, we formed bilateral agreements with 5 organizations, and that brought to Sphere standards for education, for livestock emergency guidelines, for economic recovery, for child protection, and for market analysis. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the idea of moving beyond bilateral arrangements to something more like a partnership actually started from as early as, we think, 2011. But by 2016, we had created this thing called the Humanitarian Standards Partnership, or HSP, which is hosted by Sphere. In the meantime, yeah, back one, please. Yeah. In the meantime, the foundations of the Sphere handbook had been evolving. So in 1998, which was the pilot version of the Sphere handbook, we saw the Humanitarian Charter. In edition 3 in 2011, we had the introduction of the protection principles. And then in 2015, between the third and fourth editions, we have the emergence of the core humanitarian standard. So these are actually chapters 2, 3, and 4 of the Sphere handbook, the 2018 Sphere handbook, but they form the basis of all HSP partner standards now. Next slide, please. And so if you like the modern era from 2016 to 2022, we've welcomed 4 new partners to the HSP. The first is the CHS Alliance as an associate member. And then the other 3 are bringing standards with them for camp management, for the humanitarian inclusion standards for older people and people with disabilities. And of course, as we are here today, those standards for crop production. So that's the history. What does the HSP do now? My colleagues have already mentioned a few of these things, and this of course is not exhaustive, but I'll mention 4 things. So as one of my colleagues said, there is a common format amongst standards, which means that if you learn how to use one set of these standards, you therefore know how to use all of them. The second is this idea of shared platforms. So we now have a HSP website, which was released just a couple of weeks ago. And that is at the moment a curated index to resources on the partner websites. And we also have the interactive handbook and the HSP app. So this is where you can access all the standards online. And very importantly, you can search across the standards. And in fact, on the interactive handbook, we now have a brand new navigation tool, which makes it even easier to find the information you're looking for. Accessibility is very important to us. The HSP website and the Sphere website and the interactive handbook have been tested against something called Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, that's WCAG 2.1, and we've resolved most of the issues which were identified in that audit. So our systems are very accessible. That is, of course, a journey, so we're committed to making them more accessible, to maintaining that level of accessibility. Can you go back one slide, please? All of which enables collaboration between a diverse people working in different sectors. Okay, so there's one thing which is more important than all of these things. So Sphere, I think, is probably best known for this, which is our handbook. But actually, the most important thing about Sphere is not the handbook, but the community of practice and the practitioners and the people that use that. And if you speak to any of the HSP partners, they will say the same thing. So on behalf of Sphere and the HSP, which Sphere hosts, I'm very happy to welcome SEADS, not just the handbook, but also that community of experts, so that they join this global cross-sectoral community of purpose dedicated to improving program quality. Final slide, please. And please take a note of this URL, because this is the new HSP website, which is that portal into the partner websites. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tristan. And now we're going to pass over to Kate Longley. Thank you, Kate.
I've been asked to talk about the importance of the SEADS standards for CRS and how they could be used. So I've just got 3 minutes, so I'm just going to say 3 things. First, the SEADS standards will enable us to refocus our attention on livelihoods and really what livelihoods means. Secondly, I hope it will encourage us to explore a range of different technical options for interventions in crop-related emergencies. And thirdly, the SEADS standards will help us to improve our programming, not only by implementing interventions that are built on existing evidence, but also by helping us to build that evidence base itself. So as Sean has said, the SEADS standards are based on the livelihoods approach. And I suspect that many of us have got used to using the term livelihoods without really thinking about what it means or the implications for livelihoods-based programming. So the SEADS handbook usefully highlights the key factors that are particularly important to crop-based livelihoods, and it explains how each of these factors needs to be carefully assessed and understood to be able to design appropriate responses. And the handbook also identifies livelihood objectives and how we can use those objectives to identify appropriate response areas. So these tools will allow us to take a step back and think about the broader perspective of what a livelihoods-based intervention really means and how we can successfully achieve positive impacts on people's livelihoods. My second point is about technical options for interventions. So about 20 years ago, my colleague, somebody called Tom Remington, published an article which was called Getting Off the Seeds and Tools Treadmill. And at that time, the direct distribution of seeds and tools was the most common response in crop-related emergencies. And the article put forward what was then a new alternative approach called seed vouchers and fairs. And since that time, CRS has been instrumental in developing and refining the seed voucher and fairs approach. But now this is 20 years on, it seems like we're simply on a seed voucher and fairs treadmill instead of a seed and tools treadmill. And while seed vouchers and fairs are often a really appropriate response, they've become very much business as usual within CRS, possibly at the expense of more innovative design options. So in my opinion, this is really where the SEADS handbook can help us to think more critically and more creatively about other types of interventions. My third and final point relates to the importance of evidence, and this is something that we've spoken a lot about in the past 2 days here. And when the SEADS team was compiling the evidence for the SEADS standards, we were struck by just how little evidence exists on the impacts of emergency seed interventions. So to help address this, and working with the agriculture working group, we've started to generate more evidence using some of the participatory methods recommended in the handbook. So as I say, with the agriculture working group and through the Feed the Future Global Supporting Seed Systems for Development activity, otherwise known as S3-4D, we've recently undertaken a participatory impact assessment of 3 different emergency seed interventions, 2 in Uganda and 1 in DRC. Working closely with food security partners. So in Uganda, we worked with World Vision and Lutheran World Federation to assess the impacts of their seed interventions for refugee and host communities in Adjumani district. And in DRC, we conducted a participatory impact of CRS's emergency seed interventions in central Kasai province. And as far as we're aware, this is really the first time that participatory impact assessment methodologies have been used to assess emergency seed interventions. So we're currently finalizing the reports, and we look forward to sharing the findings from these assessments with you in the coming weeks. So to sum up, I think that the SEADS standards will really usefully refocus our attention on livelihoods and allow us to be more creative in designing new appropriate interventions. And by encouraging us to undertake impact assessments, it will allow for evidence-based learning and improvements in our interventions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kate. And now our final panelist, Isaac, over to you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I take this opportunity to thank Global SEADS for having given me this one. And let me start with a brief background note on how we engage SEADS work in South Sudan. As food security cluster, we promoted SEADS through various fora, collected evidences, mobilized agriculture partners to join webinars, public consultation, and also prepared the list of potential users of the handbook, and also conducted a simulation workshop and inputted the review comments in the draft online tool that we had at that time. Now we are here. It's a SEADS release event, and we are excited. But with the question, how are we going to really operationalize this one in South Sudan? As you see on the screen, I put together those. The first slide I had it for those keywords and considering the various opportunities that we have ahead. So let me walk you through each of those action points. The first one is a consult. I hope everyone will agree that consultation is a greater motivation for policy makers and also for the implementers. And it gives also the assurance that the standards are realistic and also actionable in a different phase of emergency response. So we consult with our top 20 national and international partners. We have some parameters to consider why top 20. We take efforts in simplifying the technical chapters into TOT modules, enabling the users to understand the importance of these standards and refer them effectively while designing their agricultural livelihood responses. Thanks to SEADS Global that we will collect handbooks from here today, and we will distribute that one to our stakeholders when we organize and conduct the consultation back in South Sudan, probably in the first week of December this year. Competence, yeah, the outcome that we envisage from the consultation that we have planned is the schedule of TOT sessions. Building partners' capacity is key. FSL cluster has done that in the past with the legs when we did that one. and all that. Everybody knows about that, the livestock emergency guidelines and standards. Also, as a FSL cluster, we are in full agreement that SEADS handbook is a useful tool, a resource that we have right now. It's important to mention here that one of the cluster core functions is, of course, everybody knows about it, is the application and adherence of the standards. So it is come in handy now. We'll be able to do that one. So we are obligated to train our partners as we have done so in the past with the LEX and other key humanitarian standards, including SPHERES, primarily to build partners' capacity on effective programming and optimal utilization of resources like SEADS, LEX, and SPHERES. Coordination, bringing together humanitarian actors to ensure a coherent and principled response to emergency is important. So promoting SEADS is key in coordination with, which we will continue to do because we have been doing that one. We will also continue to do that. As I mentioned before, we did promote SEADS in various humanitarian forum years. Coordination at the national and subnational level is also essential for us, mainly to field test the modules, which we hope to do through subnational cluster coordination mechanisms that we have. FSL cluster is also committed to engage SEADS training activities in the days to come. Yeah. So then collaborate. It's important that the SEADS, the stakeholders come together to achieve best possible programming for agricultural livelihoods in emergency. So collaboration is key, again, for us to ensure improved efficiency. Making SEADS a working document. We refer to that very frequently. We have to make it. And how we are going to make it is to ensure that the standards are relevant and contextual. For that, we have to make that as a working document and enabling the stakeholders to learn flexibility efficiently and to apply the knowledge across situations will be the key focus for us. And this has been the past and the experience also with, again, LEX. I'm giving a lot of reference to LEX, which has been done there. Finally, SEADS, it actually inspires us. The new way of working, what we call it as new way of working, to align our interventions, practices, and evaluations, and not the business as usual. There are various perfect opportunities that we have to ensure high user adoption of SEADS. So we continue to drive up this enthusiasm, build acceptance through ATWG, the Agriculture Technical Working Group, and different forums that we have, engaging technical discussions and orientation sessions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isaac. I've now got a few quick questions, follow-up questions I'd like to ask the panel, and then we'll open the floor to online and in-person questions. So I wanted to start with Tristan, I think it would be useful to hear from you what you think is the difference between standards and guidelines or guidance. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Kathy. So there are a lot of standards out there and a lot of guidelines, and I think to help make sense of them, it helps to imagine a pyramid. So right at the top of that pyramid is where we have laws and treaties and conventions. So the most famous law perhaps in the humanitarian sector is the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948. On the next tier, we have policies, and ECHO has been mentioned a few times. That's the Directorate General for the European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations. For accessibility reasons, we must expand those acronyms. So ECHO funds humanitarian programs, but they also have a lot of policy guidelines, which refer to SPHERE and other HSP standards over 100 times. And there's a clear expectation that humanitarian organizations who are requesting ECHO funding do adhere to humanitarian principles and standards. So then coming down the pyramid onto the third level, the one in the middle, this is where we have standards. So humanitarian standards describe what needs to be in place to ensure life with dignity. They're rights-based, they're qualitative. So our handbooks, actually, they contain standards, they contain actions, many contain indicators, some contain targets, but actually there's a lot of guidance notes in here as well. but they can't tell you how to design a program in every context. They're really more, what needs to be in place. So if standards are the what, then on the next tier down, we have those guidelines, which is the how to actually implement, how to use those standards in a certain context, if you like. And in fact, one of my key takeaways from the last 2 days is that there is an opportunity to perhaps better catalog the guidelines which are out there, or if there are existing catalogs, just to find them and make sure that everyone is aware of them. So that's something I'd like to take on board and work with you, and some of you on that. And then at the bottom of the pyramid, we have tools. So to finish, this pyramid is a two-way thing. So practitioners obviously use tools, they use guidelines, they use standards, and they contribute to creating new documents and revising old ones. And I'd just like to note, this doesn't happen automatically. So there's definitely a role for academia to play in that and ensuring that research feeds back up that pyramid. The most dedicated users of humanitarian standards, and for SPHERE, that's our focal point network, they regularly talk to governments at national and subnational ministry level to try and get inclusion of standards into policies, for example, the ECHO guidelines. And at the top level, perhaps on a slightly longer timescale, the wisdom of the sector captured in those guidelines and standards and policies hopefully influences laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. Okay, then a quick question for Kate. You mentioned the participatory impact assessments that you've been doing, and I know the results haven't been finalized, but could you give us a very brief taster of what the findings are covering? Thank you.
Yeah, so just very briefly, out of the 3 different interventions that we assessed across Uganda and DRC, our results show that there were clear livelihood improvements in just one of those 3 cases. And in that case, it was in Uganda, the main reason for the livelihood improvement among refugee farmers, the reason for the increase in livelihood improvement was access to fertile land, not the provision of seed. So very interesting. In 2 of the cases, so one in Uganda and one in DRC, the potential impact of the seed interventions was actually substantially reduced by drought. So it really highlights the realities of climate change and the need for weather forecasting to determine whether or not to provide seed, and if so, which crop types and when in terms of seasonality and timing. And then very briefly, a last point, sort of following on from an earlier comment about horticulture, really interesting, I thought, was that among the different seed types provided, it was vegetables that were seen to have the greatest impact on livelihoods.
That's really interesting. Thank you very much, Kate. I'm going to throw a quick question to Isaac now for a brief answer on what type of crop-related responses in South Sudan do you think will most immediately benefit from the SEADS standards? Thanks.
Okay, thank you for this question. It's easy to answer. I think. Well, the crop-related response in South Sudan encompasses 3 major areas, which are covered here with seed and the crop-related response, seed and seed system, tools, equipment, other non-seeds input, and also crop-related infrastructure. See, the immediate support that we will be getting through this one is benefit that we'll be getting through this one is to, I would strongly vouch that the technical options SEADS offers to us. It provides the specific guidance on the different ways of designing our response and also delivering the crop-related responses. And also, for example, the technical chapter 4, it talks about the initial assessment of crop-related crisis response. Chapter 5 talks about technical options for supporting seed and seed system, mainly facilitating the access to seeds, availability. These are very important for us. It will be very, very helpful, the reference that we have, and also supporting the seed system and providing seeds. Seed security is also one of the major things that we have here. It talks about what are the constraints that we have and how are we, see, there are those things that really helps us. And finally, it doesn't stop there. We have advantages and disadvantages also. The partners will be able to really validate that and they'll be able to respond to it. And these guidance notes, it also has recommending readings and all. We have references also. So it is always helping our partners definitely to refer back to whatever that is needed, and they'll be able to really respond. Thanks.
Thank you, Isaac. And then a quick question for Sean. Which crops, how broad a range do the seed standard cover? Thank you.
Very briefly, food crops, basically. So perennial crops, annual field crops, as well as horticulture. So fruit and vegetables are included as well. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Okay, so let's move on to getting questions from the floor and from out there. If we start with questions within the room, just to remind people online, if you put your questions in the Q&A box in the next few minutes, and then we can, I believe they will magically arrive for me somehow. But in the meantime, let's take any questions there are from the floor. Thank you. Julie, should we start with you and then?
Thank you very much. This is a really great achievement and really useful that will answer many questions from the field teams, at least at Solidarity International. I would like to know what is a plan in terms of dissemination of the standards. Do you plan to organize, for example, training of trainers? Do you plan to train the field teams? I see several possibilities, for example, at HQ level of our organizations. People like me, for example, could be trained as a trainer for my field teams on the SEADS, but also if you plan to do directly in the field, it's always even better to train the field teams on how to use those standards, because I really think that there are many ways of improving our crop-related interventions, and those standards are really answering to many concerns that I see we have in the field on crop-related interventions. So it would be very interesting to have some trainings of our teams. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to direct that one to Sean, and then we'll keep moving around.
Okay, very good question. I'll try to give a short answer to that. Yes, is the plan is really for a next phase, ideally, for seed standards to do exactly that, because obviously these standards will only be useful if they're implemented and people need to engage with them. And also that brings important feedback for later revision of the standards, because they're an involving thing. But that depends on funding. I wish I could say, oh yes, it's in the bag, but that is the obvious next step, is to do exactly the things you highlighted and to work with engaged country teams in particular to do that. Thanks.
Thanks, Sean. And just to reinforce that point, I know from the experience of Sphere and LEGS and some of the other HSP standards that training on these standards is a really important point in terms of not just disseminating, but getting them into people's plans and ways of working. And there's a big jump between having the handbook on your shelf and actually, implementing it, the standards and guidance in the field. And I think it's a really key point. Thank you, Julie. I think there was, yes, please.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, just can I encourage you to direct your questions, if you can, to one of the panelists, and that saves me having to work out who to ask the question.
Yeah, it's difficult to do so, but I will direct to Mark and maybe Katie yourself as well. And his question, this one is crop, and Mark, you answered that, clarified. We have legs that is touching on the feed, the animal feed, but nothing related to the production of animal feed. Do I see a gap there? And how can we create a symbiotic coexistence, synergies between the two sectors that are actually so strongly interlinked? And if we manage to create the overlap that exists in Europe, for example, in many of the places where these standards will be applied, we would go a long way, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make a start and then pass to Sean. From the LEGS perspective, we have discussed the extent to which fodder production should be within the handbook, and we have left it out because we felt that generally it's not an emergency response activity. It's something that is ideally done before or afterwards, rather than during an emergency, but that is a very movable line. And, you know, in the agriculture working group yesterday, I was arguing for, you know, expanding the definition of emergency to before and afterwards. So I appreciate that it's a very fuzzy line, but at the same time, to stop any of these standards becoming the size of phone books, we have to exclude some things. But before I pass to Sean, just to say that we have talked with the SEADS secretary about if further funding is identified for another phase, which would focus on training, we would also be exploring the opportunity for some joint tools between LEGS and SEADS. For example, we have an assessment checklist. There's an assessment checklist in SEADS. Can we do an integrated one so that people don't have to carry two at once? And so we would be exploring the synergies there, because as you say, that, you know, it's a key area. But I'll just let Sean add if he wants to anything there. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. I mean, as Kathy said, there's one issue of the emergency scope of operation, but from a technical point of view, forage production could be very much still, you know, there are many issues that would be addressed by the seed standards, whether that's seed quality, needs assessment, modality, choosing around modality of intervention. So if you decide to do, whether you call that emergency or resilience, something with fodder, and goodness knows in FAO, in a number of countries, we do just that under the emergency umbrella, fodder production in Afghanistan or Somalia or South Sudan. So yes, I think technically there are lots in there that could help think through that programming. Whether it's perfectly aligned or not, perhaps another discussion, but I think it's still useful.
Thanks, Sean. Any other? Oh, yes, please.
Thank you. I have a question regarding the link to national standards and how, because one of my feelings last years is that the governments are more often reluctant to apply standards that come from outside. And for instance, like the contract organizations such like ITA and others, to help them to develop national strategy for seeds and so on. And the last 2-3 years, I think in DRC, WFP has faced a lot of challenges because there was an institution supposed to check the quality of product that enter the country, and they made our life very difficult. So, so my question is how does it link to government standards, and what's the level of conversation your guideline, your handbook kind of offer for practitioner, technical people like us to have this conversation with the government? I think this is kind of the type of activity that have a very strong link with localization and national standards. So how you make the link in your thinking? Thank you.
I'm going to get the sphere perspective on that one first. Thanks, Therese.
Thank you. Yeah, so about 18 months ago, we asked our focal point network, which includes people in DRC, and what were the sort of most important things to them. And one of the things they asked for was guidance on how to speak to national disaster management authorities. So we have since then released a technical sheet, which is available on our website, a training package, which is exactly for that. It's for our focal points to learn how to approach national disaster management authorities, and also to maybe organize training with staff of NDMAs. So I think there's some learning we can do within the HSP about how we can talk about how we extend that to the other HSP partners.
Thanks, Tristan. I can answer a little bit from the experience of LEGS, which is because obviously SEADS is at the beginning of this journey. I think it's a really important point, and there's one example from Ethiopia where the government, the Ministry of Agriculture, produced some LEGS type guidance, essentially based on the LEGS handbook for working in Ethiopia in emergency contexts. And that's, for us, that's a great example of a national ownership of the guidance and of the standards. But in a way, it's we are hoping within LEGS that there's enough of a community of practice in particular countries to take forward this debate, because that's what, in a way, the local ownership is for, and we provide support to that. But it's an ongoing challenge, I think, to institutionalize and contextualize these sort of standards at the national level. Sean, do you want to add anything there?
Not much. I mean, because it is a big topic. I mean, on a simple level, within the SEAD standards, we'd say things such as, look, if there's a national standard for seed quality, for instance, you have to work within that. At least I would say that from FAO, you know, we have to work within the nation, the member nations. Practically, when you're making a livelihoods argument, say, for example, that quality declared seed or a different quality standard may have a better livelihood reach and be still acceptable, then you're having to negotiate with national policy. And that's getting to what Kathy's saying, that I think it's about building evidence, a community of practice, and identifying those debates. I don't think they can be waved away quickly because they can be some long debates, but that might help the process of trying to shift or look at where there's flexibility in arrangements. But, you know, we have a day-to-day challenge in my day job on that sort of thing in many countries, is just how one negotiates that. So I don't want to say it's a simple matter, but hopefully that helps identify, you know, bringing it back to livelihoods and to evidence, perhaps to give a better grounding for those types of discussions to be had.
Thank you. The magic has worked. So I have a couple of questions from online. One from Leo Nalugon from IRW. Apologies for any mispronunciation. If an organization requires a training on SEAD standards, who can we get in touch with from the SEADS team? I think the short answer is watch this space on the website, following our Sean's response about you know, going forward in the next phase. Once the training program is developed and available, all that information will be on the website, and there's a mailing list you can sign up to on the website. The information is on the screen there. So please do follow that. And I've got a second question here, which is a little bit more interesting to answer, from Cyril from ACF, which I think I'm going to direct to Sean. So listen, according to SEADS, do you have a modality by default, for example, local procurement of, it looks like pleasant, but I'm sure it's peasant seeds, to be confirmed or not, and then a quick assessment? What links with agroecology do you have, explicit references and linkages? I think that's two questions. So looking at the first one, I think my reading of this, and Cyril, please shout in the Q&A box if we've got this wrong, is there a sort of automatic guiding towards local procurement, and only if that's not possible that you then look at outside within the SEAD standards?
Thanks, Cyril. Not quite that way. I mean, the stronger steer within the SEAD standards is around markets and using market approaches and around farmer participation. The questions around which crop and which variety depend on the goals of the activity, but with the participation principle there to be saying, well, these are important choices. So those crops and varieties may be of improved varieties, they may be of local varieties, and so that may shape which source one chooses. So and then there's other choices around, and back to markets, around modality of assistance, if it's going to be more market-based or direct in-kind distribution, to pick one big split, but there are other options within that. And it's thinking back to the needs and the goals. So rather than say, oh yes, we always go with local purchase from local producers, that may well be the outcome, but that's not necessarily, it's back to the needs assessment. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you. Have you got anything to add on agroecology and explicit references and linkages in the guidance to that?
Not too much, because that's a much bigger topic in terms of visions of agricultural development and goals. And goodness knows we don't have the time to debate that today, but in the sense that the overriding principles for climate, being aware of climate change, looking at longer term impacts and resilience, then some of these issues come into play. So they're there, but I wouldn't say that I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I wouldn't say that that's a kind of explicit framing or thread through, you know, it for or against particular strategies.
And so references are there, but it's not a major push. Okay. Are there any other questions from within the room? Yes, Regina.
Yeah, I'm actually not surprised that the vegetable seeds came out so strongly, because I'm a nutritionist and I'm fighting for having vegetables more on the agenda in emergency contexts, and I can't really see this happening so much. I think vegetable gardening is often not a priority when we talk with agriculture specialists. It's like, oh yeah, that's also done somewhere in the backyard, you know, but this is like a playground. This is not really farming. But we know the benefits of it, especially in emergency contexts, especially when there's displacement, when there's insecure context. And really for me, the big part is that it is a lot of the vegetables that are not consumed, they will be sold. And this is access to cash, especially in the hands of women. So with all these positive impacts or effects of vegetable, I would like to know, how did the finding from the CIS study influence the SEADS standards? Is it somehow reflected? Does it come through? Or is it just SEADS in general where we say like, yeah, it's just one big group?
I'm going to throw this to Kate. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, just to reiterate what Sean said is that the guides do, the SPHERE standards cover all crops, annual crops, food crops, and include vegetable crops. So yes, they include them. But more specifically, to reply to your question, the evidence that we're collecting did not influence the SEED standards because we only started collecting the evidence after the SEED process, the guidelines had started to be drafted. But there is a real lack of evidence. And this was very clearly shown by the review that the SEED standards team did when they tried to document the evidence of agricultural interventions on livelihoods. So there is a real need for more evidence. Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. Marta, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry I missed you earlier.
Yes, no, this from yesterday, I moderated the localization group and we discussed impediments in terms of access, especially for national, local, community-based organizations and national NGOs to the humanitarian. Yeah.
It's on.
Yes, it's on. Can you hear me? Okay, should I repeat? I moderated the localization discussion yesterday and we discussed impediments in terms of for national and local actors to access the international humanitarian coordination system, as well as funding and other aspects. And one of the impediments that was used as an example was the requirements around the SEED certification at the national level. And I know there's a lot of debates around that, but I just wanted to bring that into the conversation and question probably for Kate and Sean, and that's the first question. I have a second quick question, which is probably to everyone. What do you see as the role of the food security cluster partners to increase or to launch the adoption of the SEADS standards so what can we do as a community to support? Over.
Okay, thanks, Marta. Well, let's start with Kate in answering the first question about SEED certification, whether that's an impediment in terms of localization. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. The SEEDS guidelines recognize that there are different perceptions on seed quality. And although a national seed system or a national seed authority requires that within the formal seed sector seed is certified, it also recognizes that at the farmer level, farmers have a very different perception about seed quality. And of course, the seed that farmers use on a season to season basis is seed that they've saved themselves or seed they've accessed from local markets, which might be good quality grain. And there is no certification. I mean, I think the percentages vary, but between at least 70, 80, in some cases, 90% of the seed that is planted by farmers is not certified. It comes from the informal seed system. And so the seed standards recognizes that there are these varying perceptions about seed quality. And so there's no requirement according to the seed standards to use certified seed. But like Sean says, it depends very much on the objectives and the aims or the intentions of a particular intervention. So in that sense, it wouldn't be an impediment, but Sean can add more.
Sean, do you want to?
Sorry, I was trying to find there is actually, yeah, here we go, minimum standard 5.5 on seed quality. And, you know, I won't read it out in detail, but just to the highlight, the quality of the seed and the response meets the needs and requirements of crop producing communities, practitioners and donor organizations. So you've got these three stakeholders and the needs and requirements. And so it's similar to an answer earlier about national standards and debates, that sometimes that's very easy to line up and say, fine, if the organization's given room to work with the details there, the quality of seed should be as good as what farmers already use. It should be acceptable, and that's seed quality and the variety as well. Both those technical aspects matter. But sometimes there, as you know, there are government requirements that say only certified seed or you're not in this game, and that can be restrictive for all actors. So it's the seed standards are there to try to at least guide on what will have a livelihoods impact, but there may still be legislation or other, institutional challenges for people on the ground, and that need to be ironed out.
Thank you, Sean. For the second question, I'm going to ask Isaac. As Isaac mentioned, he's a member of the what they call the SEADS field team, and there's a few of these in different parts of the world, and they've been very active in the preparation of the standards and will be very active moving forward. So maybe you could talk very briefly, because we're heading for coffee break, from your perspective in response to the question, what's the role of cluster partners to foster the adoption of seeds?
Yes, thank you for that. And that's what kind of precisely what I mentioned in my presentation also, like we bring consensus from the partners because the partners were involved in this particular process right from the beginning. When we collected the evidences and a lot of that kind of preparation happened. And also we'll continue to work with SEADS at the global level. When we have these training modules, we just convert them into the kind of simplified modules where we'll be able to identify that TOTs, that are lead trainers from each organization, because we have identified 40 NGOs, 20 national NGOs, 20 international organizations. They'll be able to really take it further down. What is important is building their capacity based on the constant relationship that we have with the SEADS at the global level, and also the inputs that we receive from them, and that we convert into a kind of actionable agenda. One important thing is given the flexibility, the standards, we'll be able to really work with the partner in order to adapt to our context. Because as Mark mentioned about how are we going to align it with, because any standards that we have should be able to really align with that local context. The relevance is there, the context is also there. We'll be able to really negotiate, we'll be able to really, without compromising the principles, without compromising the essence of it, the spirit of it, we'll be able to do that. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Starting to wrap up now, and just reflecting on some of the issues that have been raised. I think part of the objective of the SEADS standard is to contribute to improving program quality, which is one of the issues that's come up over the last couple of days, and to build technical capacity to continue to improve in this area. And one of the points that mentioned both by Kate and by Isaac was innovation and new ways of working, and trying to encourage us to think outside the usual box or the treadmill or the business as usual way of working, and learn from collected evidence and experience from around the world. And I think that word evidence has come up a lot, both in the last couple of days and this morning. And the importance of having evidence-based guidance, which the HAP standards all aim to provide. SEADS has quite an extensive database of evidence that it reviewed in order to produce these standards, and would welcome further contributions to that evidence base. So obviously the participatory impact assessments that Kate mentioned, for example, would be a key document to share, and any other contributions going forward would be most welcome. But ultimately, the hope is that the SEADS standards can help to contribute to improving quality and improving the lives of those affected by food insecurity. As we all know, monitoring and evaluation is important, so we want to do a very quick Mentimeter as we did yesterday, if that could be magically popped up on the screen. Two very quick questions, if you wouldn't mind going to menti.com, entering the code, and please, if you're watching online, please do the same. It's just menti.com website, and the code is 62522427. Two very simple questions. How likely are you or your organization to use SEADS in your work? And the second question is why? So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to go into that. And then maybe we can see the results coming up. It's not quite as exciting as waiting for the results of the US election, but hopefully they will appear on the screen in a minute. Oops.
SEADS is not on there yet.
Sorry?
Can we have the number back again for the Menti?
6252.
Hello, can we have the number back for the
2427.
Menti code?
While we're waiting for the final results, I just wanted to close by thanking everyone for participating both here in the room and online. Oh, sorry. Yes, please go ahead.
Would you mind putting the code back up on the
Oh,
screen?
can we put the code back up on the screen? Sorry, I asked for the results too quickly. I can also read it out. It's 6252 2427. 6252 2427. Okay, 6252 2427. Okay, so I was in the middle of saying thank you, which I will say again. You can get the SEADS handbook on the SEADS website. Search for SEADS standards. It's available on the interactive HSP site, which is linked from the website. You can also join the mailing list to stay in touch with what's happening. Oh, there we go. That's looking very positive. Can we have a quick look at the second page? We'll be taking these answers forward, so we won't analyze them in any depth now. And also finally to say that there are copies of the handbook at the back. If you are an agriculture working group member, you should, hopefully most of you already have one. If you are an information management officer or a cluster coordinator, please don't take one because there are a separate allocation for you. Anybody else, please take one per organization. And then if there's some left, obviously we'll dish them out, but we want to try and make sure as many people as possible get their copy to take home. So I'm getting looks from Davide, so I'm going to say thank you very much indeed for your time, and thanks to the panel as well. Thank you.
Thanks. So let's come back at 11:40 from the coffee break. So I welcome the session 12. So it's our last but not least session on the global network at 12 on the global network against food crisis. So Gwen Luke, who is our colleague in the Global Food Security Cluster team dedicated to the global network, will lead the session. And Gwen, you would like also to do the introduction for the other speakers that will be join the group. So thank you, and over to you.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Gwenaëlle Luc. I am working for the Global Food Security Cluster, but more specifically on a project that aims to strengthen coordination between humanitarian development and peace actors. So we've been talking a lot about the HDP nexus over the past 2 days, but also about localization. So this session will be about more trying to present what we have been doing over the past 2 years in terms of trying to strengthen this coordination at country level, local level, but also global level, amongst HDP actors. So I will be co-presenting this session with my colleague Guy, who is the cluster coordinator in Chad. My colleague Isaac, who was also part of the previous panel, who is co-facilitator of the food security cluster in South Sudan, and our colleague online, Mariam, who is the food security cluster HDP focal point in Northeast Nigeria. I hope she will be able to join. If not, maybe our colleague Leslie, the cluster coordinator for Nigeria, will be able to jump in. So if we're ready, slide, okay, perfect. So part of the global network against food crisis that has been launched in 2016 during the World Humanitarian Summit, the European Union, FAO and WFP have joined forces with this initiative that aims to tackle root drivers of protracted food insecurity and trying to promote sustainable solutions through an improved coordination across humanitarian development and peace actors. So, in part of this global initiative, the Global Food Security Cluster joined forces in effort over the last 2 years, focusing on improving the coordination amongst humanitarian community, but linking with development peace communities. So we basically focused on 3 main work streams. And that would be the next slide, please. So the first work stream was about trying to understand who are the actors, mapping the existing platforms about development and peace, where we can strengthen the bridge between cluster at country level and also those existing platforms. So we try to map those actors in 5 selected countries that has been prioritized based on several criteria. That are Chad, Nigeria, South Sudan, Somalia, and Mali. And today we will present some case study from 3 of this country. So in those countries, we try to first map what are the HDP platform, what are the HDP actors working together in the same area, and what are their actions. And with the aim of understanding potential synergy, local capacities, and gaps. The second work stream mainly focus on strengthening coordination to improve joint context analysis and joint planning together. So for this one, we try to gather all actors in the same room at national level, but also subnational level, and try to see what are the convergence between the action that have been done in the same area. And the idea was to try to see how we can better improve the coherence between those actions with joint response plan, but also a sequence targeting strategy, making sure that, for example, some households that are already benefiting from emergency assistance then will will benefit from another package about more resilience and to improve their capacity and protect their livelihoods. And for this, we have also been working together with other cluster existing counterparts at national level and local level from development and peace building side, and try to first gather on and look at what data are available and how we can bring our data together to have this joint analysis of the context. So basically bringing food security data and indicators, but also climate data, conflict data all together to have this joint analysis of the context as a starting point to plan together and look at what we can do all together. So for this one, we will give you an example from Chad, where we team up with university and research institutions such as Tufts University, but also Jamena University. And we also team up with governmental partners and technical institutions to come up with a paper that have been that will be published in December, but yeah, like a research to better understand the systematic drivers of the situation of protracted food insecurity. And then we also worked on trying to improve data sharing between partners. So obviously partners from emergency, but also from development and peace building, and try to see if we are trying to merge this data together and triangulate those data together, then we might come up with a better picture of the situation, and also having better recommendation and tools to monitor the situation and then anticipate further deterioration of the situation. And finally, we have been also conducting in South Sudan, and that will be presented by Isaac and a short film, a participatory learning exercise, trying to see how HDP actors are coordinating with each other in South Sudan, and what are the lessons learned, the challenge and opportunity for better coordination. So in this video, you will see mainly local actors, but we also included beneficiaries, national government and donors to have different perspectives on how we can improve coordination to address more holistically the problem and the drivers of protracted food insecurity. Next slide, please. So just to give you in a nutshell how it works, we have a small team here at global level. We have been supporting those 5 countries over the past 2 years, for some of them more recently, but basically we have been reinforcing capacities at national level by, for example, providing additional human resources to food security cluster for them to, for example, dedicated information manager to do this HDP mapping or other HDP focal points to do the joint programming. So I will now give the floor to my colleague Guy to give you an overview of what happened in Chad in terms of this joint analysis and how it led to joint programming.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Slide, please. So in Chad, as we are all aware, is a country where we have protracted acute and food insecurity and also malnutrition spread almost country nationwide. And since several decades, actors, donors, and also women have been fighting against those those high rates of malnutrition and food insecurity. And as Gwen said, we succeed to build kind of a technical team to carry out a survey so that with the main aim to understand the basic drivers and also the pathway we can follow to lead those who are leading food insecurity and also community weaknesses. So as you can see in the map, that is a little bit small. So in the far west of Chad, what you see with those red colors is a big hotel of other fighting the fightings between armed groups, what we call gangs. You have also some conflict between communities there in the far west. So most of the time, people are flying from this part to go to the green part where you have more grass. And as you can imagine, they are making a lot of pressure on the natural resources. And we have also, it's too small in the map. We have also malnutrition and also food insecurity spread out in all those parts of the country. The two parts we have been focusing on are Kanem provinces and also Beg, who we used to call Bar El Ghazel. And the main findings we got through the field data gathering after analysis realized that acute malnutrition and food insecurity are highly clustered. Wherever you have a food insecurity household, sometimes you should have a lack of access to water and sanitation, or have also malnutrition spread in those areas. We found also that food insecurity and also malnutrition are due to many types of factors. So we have many drivers, not only for conflicts, but also to access to resources. And after, slide please, after the data processing and data analysis, the group of actors, we realized you succeed to put around the table. They are trying to highlight the main focus of the action plan. So as joint plan, in the joint plan, you got those who have been targeting water sanitation, so have been targeting livestock health, for example, animal vaccination or food provision of fodder for livestock before dry season. Those have been targeting demanding intervention. As I said, in this part of the country, people are fighting since over 50 years. We got also some actors who have been targeting mediation and peace building around access to water and land. And as outcome what you are expecting, the process is still ongoing. You are expecting to align all actors in terms of targeting and programming strategies so that you can have a sound impact on linkage between humanitarian development and also peace building. This is what I can summarize on the situation we have now in Chad, and I'm going to hand over my colleague from Nigeria, Mariam, if you don't mind.
Thank you very much. Mariam, are you online?
Yes, Gwen. Thank you very much, Gwen. I'm very much online. Next slide, please. All right. For Nigeria, for the context of Nigeria, which is focusing on the northeastern part of Nigeria, which comprises of the base states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe, we have some supportive scenarios for the HDP Nexus project, one of which is the presence of ongoing initiatives of humanitarian sustainable development and peace building across many sectors. We also have the existence of a well-structured government system who are willing to take leadership roles for the HDP Nexus project for Borno and Adamawa states. We have the Ministry of MRRR, which is the Ministry of Reconstruction, Rehabilitation, and Resettlement. And for Adamawa, we have for Yobe, we have the Ministry of Humanitarian and Disaster Management, who are willing to take leadership roles for the HDP Nexus project. We also have in country, the National Humanitarian Development Peace Frameworks and other frameworks across the base states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe, which are supportive of the HDP Nexus project. Also, the impact of the Boko Haram crisis, the impact of the farmer-headed clashes, and all of that. And yeah, the high demand by all actors for the humanitarian development and peace work. So far, what we have been able to do in Nigeria, we've been able to map out actors and interventions contributing to the food security in Borno. As we can see the map in Borno, we have mapped out actors again across both government and non-government actors. And we have 121 actors working in Borno. We have 57 of them in Adamawa and 51 in Yobe. Also, we have been working towards bridging the existing gaps and strengthening platforms to build trust among actors, the HDP actors. Also, we are working on building on the existing supportive scenarios that we have in country, like I've mentioned earlier on, the National Humanitarian Development Peace Frameworks and other frameworks at state level for the HDP Nexus project. The objective of this is to identify synergies, to avoid duplication of activities, and also to cover existing gaps. Next slide, please. So the HDP Nexus plan in northeastern Nigeria, we were able to organize a workshop across the different LGAs across the different states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. And together we were able to come up with a convergence of analysis for priority locations, but also to be able to come up with the programming and targeting alignment for the HDP Nexus in Nigeria. And this is aimed at increasing collective effectiveness of the fight against food insecurity and also malnutrition by strengthening synergy between HDP activities. So the activities have been divided into 2 sessions we have at community levels and also at household level. At household level, we have the food assistance, livelihood rehabilitations and protection, value chain and capacity building, sustainable natural resource management, which will be done using the graduation plan. And at community level, we have WASH, we have health, education, nutrition, governance, peace, and livelihoods and early recovery activities that will be done. Next slide, please. All right, here are some of the challenges and way forward for Nigeria. One of which is the additional efforts are required to bring together coordination of multisectoral partners at the national level, but most importantly at the state, LGA, and ward levels where we are operational. And the possible solution we have highlighted is to strengthen the coordination in line with existing national and international standards, and also to be able to bank on previous lessons learned from other countries. We've heard from Chad, we hear from other places, those that have gone ahead where they have been able to do, to be able to use those lessons learned to also strengthen the coordinations between multi-sectoral partners that we have here in country. Also, one of the challenges, the need to strengthen partner information management system, and also to build the capacity for government and local partners. One of the solutions also we have for what we have mentioned and what we will be able to do is that there are a lot of gaps in activities, but most importantly, also there are a lot of funding gaps. So funds are key for us in achieving all of these things. And also for the capacity building, we said some of the solutions will be to provide capacity building for governments that have taken leadership roles. These can be through trainings, exchange visas, and all of that, so that they can be able to, capacities can be built for the HDP Nexus project. Also to scaling up and strengthening of platforms for sharing data and analysis. Another challenge that we have is insecurity, like I've mentioned earlier, on the issue of the Boko Haram, the farmer-headed clashes we have, and all of that, which had led to poor access to some of these locations. Also, we have one of the challenges, the risk in targeting IDP due to further displacements. The government has been on the move and talking and working towards ensuring zero camps, so that everyone goes back to where they are coming to reintegrate and resettle rather than having camps. So targeting IDPs which are in camp will be quite tricky because of for that possibility of further displacement. Finally, implementing the HDP Nexus sustainable and long-term task, which requires, as we have been doing, would require more of substantial coordination, interaction, and changes to the system. Once that is in place, we will be able to make a lot of impact and then also make efficient use of funds. Thank you very much. Over to you, Gwen.
Thank you very much. So now over to my colleague Isaac to introduce the participatory learning exercise and lesson learned from South Sudan.
Thank you, Gwen. I come with this disclaimer that it is Mustafa who is the lead consultant who was doing this process, and I was part of that. But now I take this opportunity again. Thank you, Gwen, to present South Sudan. As Gwen mentioned, the work streamline, the first one, the mapping of analysis of HDP Nexus synergies. We were also one of the countries in South Sudan, and we got this opportunity to implement this on the joint participatory assessment. This process was very intentional for us because we had another kind of similar effort going in South Sudan. You know about the PFRR, the Partnership for Recovery and Resilience, and also CSRF, the Conflict Sensitivity Resource Facility. They are also doing a kind of similar kind of thing, mapping exercise in the country to understand and to come out with a kind of a national level framework, what they call it as conflict and gender sensitive framework. How are we going to balance this one? Because we don't do in a kind of, sorry? Okay. Yeah, so we wanted to have a synergy. So we had a kind of conversation with that initiative also that was led by FA1WF again. We had this conversation, and after that we were able to design our program, and it was designed in such a way that we identified 5 locations where we have slide. Oh yeah. Okay, we'll have that video later, maybe after this one. So the process was like this. We identified 5 locations where we had the RSR Trust Fund project. We call it as a Reconciliation, Stabilization, and Resilience Trust Fund, and also 1 BMZ project, which is cross-border project in Torit, on location called Torit. And also we had WFP implemented FFA, pastoralist FFA, food for asset, in Greater Pibor administrative area. In these 5 locations, we were able to really bring partners together and do this exercise. The process was like this. We organized a kind of a consultation workshop where we brought all the stakeholders, not only the partners that were implementing, but also the UN agency, the different stakeholders, including the local leaders, authorities, and the government officials. We had the workshop the first day. We had that kind of consultation, and also we had group sessions, which was focusing more on brainstorming to identify and reflect on practical lessons that learned and their perspectives. All of those things we were able to do that, and also key informants interview in different locations, and also the focus group discussion with different groups. For example, the Farmer Field School, Water Management Committee, like that, no? Say as villages, VSLS, Village Savings, and these kind of groups. It really gave a lot of information for us, which we were able to really gather. So that was done, and after that, the process is like, no, you will be able to see, relate them in the video that you are going to see now in another 1 minute. We are planning to have a kind of validation workshop, which is planned in the first week of December, where we'll be able to bring all the stakeholders together at the national level in order to validate the kind of information that we have, and how are we going to balance with this PFRR, that effort, because PFRR, one of the topics that we have is food security and agriculture. So that is also going to be one of the area where we are going to do real collaboration and work together with that PFRR and the CSRF initiative. So let's have the video where we have some of the experiences, not evidences, experiences that we have shared also there. Thank you.
The main drivers of the conflict in Jonglei and the Greater Pibor administrative area is mainly competition for limited resources, especially grazing land and water for livestock. And this is against the backdrop of the national crisis dating back to December 2013, and therefore there is usually a correlation between the national level dynamics and the regional and local level dynamics, and they influence each other. Main objective is leveraging of the humanitarian development and peace building nexus to promote peace and stability in the area. And these are considered prerequisites for sustainable development interventions. You know, bringing together all the partners, irrespective of whether they are implementing humanitarian interventions or development or peace-building interventions, to come together, do joint context analysis and agree together on how each and every other partner can make a contribution towards addressing the drivers of conflict and violence. Basically focusing on reduction of violence, especially the violence targeting women and children, strengthening local mechanisms for dispute resolution, strengthening the capacity of justice sector actors to enable them to resolve local disputes, strengthening governance, increasing access to services, especially health services, and provision of trauma healing and psychosocial support, and increasing economic opportunities and livelihood opportunities, especially for women and youth, because youth are mostly involved in violence in the community because they have limited options for livelihoods and economic opportunities.
I'm appealing to the donors to help move away from the humanitarian response, especially emergencies, and bring resilient and development projects. Because our people, we have been giving them the simple material like plastic kit, other things like which are just only for 3 months, 6 months, mosquito net and all this. We need to make big things like large scale agriculture, make big farms. We need also to make something that is adapt to climate change. There are recurring floods that are happening in this state every year, and even drought. Some areas there is drought, some areas there is flooding. And if we can sit down as partners and donors to plan together to see what other alternative can be used so that we respond to the disaster. These are the pages.
Basically focusing on the three pillars. The pillar of reconciliation, given that this community had suffered endemic cycle of violence, and therefore it was necessary to break this cycle of violence. The other pillar deals with the stabilization, so that government role is visible, but also helps in ensuring that services are provided to the people. The third pillar is to do with the resilience at household level, but also communities' engagement, so that they are able to respond to shocks that are within their means.
I wish some of us, the members actually, were telling the thing that which were actually hindering us, that we ever not able to cover them. Since the committee from humanitarian development partners, peace came, so we highlighted the kind of the thing that we had learned in the fields, and we hope in that case, as we sat together from in discussing this thing, how we, the members from different identities, so it will take us to the next stage, whereby next round we will not be remaining the way things are before.
I will say the general challenges for all national NGOs based in Warab. One, coordination is a problem. There is a big gap of coordination between international NGOs and the national NGOs here in the state. Most of the international NGOs are based in Juba, and national NGOs, some of them are based here in the state. And if there is a call proposal, it is very difficult now to access donors here on the ground.
The main mechanism for coordination and collaboration of the RSRTF program is the Area Reference Group. It comprises of all the partners that are directly funded by RSRTF, but also all the other partners that are operating in the same area as the program. Because this ensures that there are holistic interventions, there's information sharing, and partners get to know that in as much as they are implementing interventions according to their primary core mandates.
The ARG is basically a forum that brings in the local government, it brings in the partners within the consortium, it brings in the humanitarian actors who are working in coach. It also brings in the other institutions like the traditional religious institution, the youth groups, the women group. It is basically a platform that provides opportunity for accountability and transparency.
At the state level, especially in Jonglei side, the Ministry of Peace Building finalized the development of the strategic framework, and this is supposed to be the main point of reference for all peace building interventions in the state, and therefore moving forward, this is still underway. The Ministry of Peace Building, if provided with the required resources, the goal is to ensure that the ministry is in the front line of leading peace building interventions across the HCP nexus. Initially, most peace building interventions were subsumed into the protection cluster, but that was not a good fit. But now that the area reference group is in place, peace building interventions and also all other interventions that make a contribution to peace building have a better forum for coordination of interventions. There exist various humanitarian clusters, and some of the implementing partners are actually cluster leads, and therefore they have been included in the area reference group, including the head of field office for the Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, but also partners in the area reference group are also involved in other coordination forums such as the Intercluster Coordination Forum and many other forums that area, and information is shared across all these coordination forums to ensure that there is internalization of findings, especially on conflict sensitivity.
Now, in that process, they are able to share in resources, share in resource persons that each of the partners brings on board, but also share in logistics that has been put in a pool, but also share in information that can help each of the partners to implement subsequent activities. And then the most crucial one is also share in the database of the beneficiaries or participants that have already probably benefited from one of the pillars. And the sharing of the database has been very helpful in the sense that we are avoiding duplication in terms of overlapping of the participants being taken for the same activities by the different partners. And each of the already participants or targeted beneficiaries are able to participate in the triple nexus in terms of their engagement in the different pillars.
Current RSRTF program is funded by about 7 partners. Other donors have encouraged their implementing partners to be part and parcel of the area reference group to strengthen coherence and coordination of peace-building interventions across the nexus. And we are looking to sustaining this push to ensure that all actors in the area of programming are included. In the past, we've had funding come to an abrupt stop, and there being no strategic funding to continue with peace-building interventions that led to disruption, and therefore having multi-donor funding is creating awareness among the donors to ensure that there is a sequencing of funding for continued interventions and for supporting the gains that have been made by previous interventions.
You get only 3-month project with few staff, even with no staff sometimes. Without asset to you facilitate. That one does not allow the organization to grow, because if the organization do not have a vehicle, do not have a motorbike, do not have computer, you cannot be able to implement your activity. This is one of the biggest challenges.
What I would recommend in terms of strengthening coordination is advocating for more resource allocation in terms of ensuring that there is establishment of structures at national, state, and even local level, well resourced with good staffing to ensure that there is consistent coordination of coherent interventions around the nexus of humanitarian peace development and peace building interventions.
How the stakeholders that coming from a different background of institution can come and share their ideas in relation to the development of the states, especially under the humanitarian development piece.
That's facing us, and we need to improve, and we need to change away from the past and move to the new direction.
Thank you very much. So now we can open for question, if any, please.
After the movie.
So it was the last session, just a short movie to find. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. I'm wondering, like, so far I understood you are using the graduation model, right? So I'm wondering if you could, maybe one of the countries participating in this project, if you can share maybe some figures of of your positive impact. Thank you.
No, thanks for that. So we are using a contextualized graduation model. So it's more about food security graduation, and our project is more focusing on improving coordination. And at this stage now in Chad, for example, this model has been funded. So we received fund earlier this year. So it started 2 years ago about the coordination, then planning together, and then starting this graduation approach. And we start 6 months ago. So hopefully in the next months or year, we will be able to share if in terms of impact of coordination, improvement of coordination, but also of graduation of household and how they manage to sustain to themselves and lifting household and community from protracted hunger. So work in progress.
So thanks for the presentations. I mean, for me, I think concretely to improve coordination, I think there needs to be a consensus of on definitions. I don't know if people share the same feeling, but in terms of where the line is drawn, and if we want to draw a line already, because of course, one of the main drivers of food insecurity is obviously conflict, but then poverty is another factor. And then I know that the stakes are high if we want to talk about at the top leadership level of who's leading what, etc. But for me, I'm like, are we really talking about the nature of activity or the funding stream or the profile of the agency implementing or the population we're targeting? Because I think to concretely really channel those, and the last time I checked a bit of the what's out there on definitions, the consensus wasn't, it's not there, or it's still not clear. So for the purposes of day-to-day work, because we of course have different platforms, and sometimes, there's a redundancy, there's an obvious redundancy, and then, in the field, things overlap. And then are we just talking maybe just about the cycle of funding? This is how we're lodging, because activities look alike in many instances. So yeah, maybe how, I know it's maybe a big discussion, we can definitely speak longer after, and it's the last session, but yeah, thanks.
Can you reply? You collect all the questions? Can you answer immediately? Okay, just to answer that to our colleague from Myanmar, as Gwen said, at the starting point, you have tried to put on the table all type of actors. You have to have a minimum of consensus. And in our plan, at least every 6 months, we are going to check also if everything is going on the right track. For example, earlier in December, we are planning to have a workshop, not only with implementing partners, but also with donors. And luckily, Gwen will be around in chat. So even though she's coming in chat for the survey, we are going to involve her in this 2 days workshop so that we can see after 6 or 5 months, 7 months of implementation of the process, if the consensus we had at the beginning, we are still together. If something is going wrong, you have enough time to adjust. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess Leslie might have some also additional reflection on this one.
Yes, thank you, Mariam, for the presentation on our behalf, Nigeria team. Just to add on, the issue of infrastructure gaps, poverty, the case in Nigeria would be a classic point. A country which has a strong and steady government, the strong steady government with the frameworks in place, with all these development plans going side by side with the history of some of the chronic challenges in those regions in the Northeast, but also coming in the same context of where there is development ongoing side by side, the different forms of conflict. So this project specifically bringing on the aspect of the duration being more than just 1 year, because most of the humanitarian responses are maximum 1 year. This is a 3-year plan that we have. And also the aspect of research is key. Yesterday, I emphasized the need for research stroke evidence. whatever is going to be built out of this is going to be critical, especially for the case of Nigeria. And we're also seeing conflict going to countries which were traditionally not having the decades of long-lasting conflict. This will be a strong lesson learned to all those other contexts, and what we can pick out of this to also support the governments in this, get stronger in this way with the evidence. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for very good presentations. Very interesting topic that I would like to learn more about. It's a bit short here, but I just have two questions actually. The one is a bit on the graduation approach. Is a bit similar to what was here before. It's a bit confusing when you're using graduation approaches and it's not the graduation approach. So maybe another, I don't know. I'm not going to give advice, but because when I heard graduation approach, I was thinking about graduation approach, like the whole, yeah, anyway. And then from Nigeria, when you say there's a risk in targeting IDPs due to further displacement, and I didn't really hear like, how are you dealing with that? Because of course, that's a big concern for us in NRC related to, because this is our primary target group. So how do we deal with that? Are we just saying it's a challenge and we can't do anything about it? Or how are we addressing that? That was one of the things I was wondering about. Thank you.
Maybe, yes.
Thank you for the great presentation. It's quite impressive to see the comprehensive focus in South Sudan, which includes a focus on trauma, healing, psychosocial support. However, looking at the video, which I find quite very interesting, it's quite male dominated. So I'm wondering, in terms of coordination, how are you ensuring that the voices of women-led organizations in South Sudan who are active in humanitarian response are actually centered in South Sudan? Also acknowledging the fact that South Sudan is actually one of the pilot countries where the gender-based violence area of responsibility is working around strengthening capacity of women-led organizations at the state level to take on co-coordination of the GBV subclusters in South Sudan. So I'm wondering how they are involved or could be involved going forward. Thanks.
Okay, can I respond to that?
Now, two questions: how the social protection discussion fit into your strategy, and the second one, I have the impression in most places, like in DRC, the government consider themselves as beneficiaries of the NSUS process. Why? Meanwhile, they're supposed to be a stakeholder, like doing their part of the job, rather than to be considered as beneficiaries. So, how you manage that caveat in your process? Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation as well. Just one quick question for South Sudan and Nigeria specifically. Because of the presence of monitoring systems for the context and or needs analysis and coordination mechanism, are they included in the coordination? If yes, how is it working? And if not, what might be the challenges? Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Really interesting presentation. I like the NRC colleague, would love to discuss this more. Just a couple of questions. Given the sort of funding shortfalls that are faced in these countries, I'm really curious how that influences or impacts the 3-year plan. I know we're seeing for refugee contexts in particular, when you have these sort of theoretical models of graduation, the challenges of actually realizing food security results are huge, given that we're, so underfunded. So I'm just curious, do you have costed plans for each of these countries? And then linked to that, are IFIs or development actors engaged? And are these plans included in their support to national governments? Thank you.
That's a lot. Maybe I can start answering some of the easiest one.
Maybe I can start answer. I agree with the women are missing from the South Sudan video. I definitely agree. I can ensure that in the next iteration of the film, some of them will be included. We asked to have new interview of women, but the video we received were only men. And I guess it reflects also some of the context that we are trying to address. So be sure in the next version, we will include woman voice in it. Also, in terms of how we ensure funding for the 3 years project, fortunately, in some country, there is some HDP donor task force. So, for example, in Chad, donors join forces and try to see how they can manage HDP pool funds. So it's still in progress, but they are really engaged in this process. So in Chad, for example, we have now BHA and European Union that have provided funds for the next 3 years of this multi-actor project to try it. For some other countries, less advanced in the process than Chad, for example, Nigeria, we are now in the process of advocacy. So we will organize next week, hopefully, a donor roundtable to see how also at their level they can coordinate between emergency and development donors. So that's the strategy that at all level we have taken.
I think there was one on for the IDPs and solutions. Actually, one thing we need to understand that this project is not recommending any actions at the global level. So what they're trying to do is they're collecting the data at the national level. Global Food Security Cluster team, very few people with only one IM officer at the global level. What we are trying to do is we are helping them to, we used to collect data only on humanitarian assistance against the HRP. So that's a lot of work to collect more data about the different other sectors of peace sectors as well, development actors, trying to connect with them. So at the first stage, we are collecting all this data and then trying to make sense of that data. But even in that role, we are trying to involve the different stakeholders rather than doing it ourselves. And then our information management teams are trying to help them to map it out so that it can help in decision making. Specifically on your questions to IDP, that's why I gave you this reference first, that even on the IDPs, there is no thinking at the global level among the Global Food Security Cluster at the moment and among our team. This data on the IDPs is at the national level. They try to look at it and they try to find the solutions. We are helping them to organize, once this data is compiled, workshops. And I think we are also really concerned about self-sustainability of that mechanism, because we cannot keep funding. It was very difficult for us to provide resources for some of the workshops that happened to find solutions of different issues. But I think this is not sustainable and we will not be able to do it in future. Even in future, I mean, in the next 2 months, we will not be able to do it. But at the country level, the positive sign is all these stakeholders are getting together. They are using the clusters platform to discuss these issues and find localized solutions. So at the global level, it's very minimal, and there will be very little after December 2022. So all those actors who really want to engage, they need to engage at the national level. They need to participate in those workshops when our cluster coordinators announce this information, come up very well prepared that what are their expectations from those coordination mechanisms, and then try to find out the solutions. Clusters can help to advocate for those solutions. That's our role. But cluster will not write proposals to find money to implement. That's not our role. So yeah, that's a very clear distinction between what we will be able to do and what we will not be able to do. And the same goes for the social protection. Social protection mechanisms are there. There was yesterday in the Asian market working group, there were a few questions as well. On that, like in Pakistan, when we very recently developed our response plan, by that time, government was already able to reach 5.4 million people. See, there are mechanisms which are already available. We can help to identify those mechanisms. We can help to, bring different stakeholders on one table, being cluster coordinators or cluster coordination team. But, it's basically, yeah, in many countries, governments are leading on it. So your question is very valid, that government is in many instances the part of the problem rather than, maybe a part of the solution. So these complications are there. And these complications are not only for, bringing these stakeholders together for development as well. It's also, for humanitarian work in many countries. And you have the examples. I don't want to name a few where we are facing very big challenges at the moment. So yeah, I think on the social protection as well, it's for us that to identify those mechanisms and then trying to help that how those mechanisms can be used by the humanitarian partners. But the role of the cluster that we play is only, coordinating, linking those people, providing evidence, bringing data together, showing it in a better way so that they have a clear picture of who are the actors and what are they doing. That's where our mandates end.
We are 10 minutes to 1, so we need to close the session. Do you mind if I ask you to have a separately just after this? Okay, Regine, very quickly, because now you are not the meeting chair, so you can do that.
Yeah, I see there's a huge interest in the topic, and I would like to highlight to you 2 pieces the Concern Worldwide is working on at the moment. One is a research that is still ongoing, but hopefully there will be a report out before the end of the year. It's about conflict and food systems. It's by Concern Worldwide and Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. And it's about the impact of conflict on various elements of the food system, to identify those with the biggest influence on food and nutrition security amongst the extreme poor. And it's done in Haiti, Somalia, Sudan, and Syria. And I've seen some preliminary findings. It's quite interesting. Yeah. And the second thing is there's a advocacy campaign at the moment in Concern Worldwide. It's called Nothing Kills Like Hunger. And when you go on the Concern website, there is a link to a video that is showing youth, young people in those 4 countries, explaining what it means for them to live in insecure contexts and how it is related to food insecurity for youth. And I think this is a perspective that is not often seen. So just for you to have some more resources and evidence. Thanks.
Isaac, you have 15 seconds since you have been in many sessions.
Okay, so I just want to, because this will help many of the things to kind of.
You have already done 5 seconds.
Yes, three things we focus: coordination, programming, and financing. For example, if you take programming, coordination, we are talking about, it's not integration. It's our partners coming together. In that, for example, joint context analysis, joint needs and assessment, joint monitoring and response, joint implementation. When we talk about the GBV thing, it's about sequencing, it's about layering. So GBV will come in, definitely social protection will come in. We come together and we plan accordingly, we do that. That is the kind of idea that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And sorry for rushing up. Thanks a lot, Gwen and colleagues, for the very interesting session. We still have some time after the meeting, but I want to have your attention now because we want to launch the evaluation, and please do it, take it. Walter, if you can put online the code, again, Mentimeter. So please take your time. A couple of minutes will be enough, I believe, before. Please also attention to the closing remarks from our global cluster coordinators, and then we close the meeting. But please, this is very important. So it's not Mentimeter, is we change because, okay, we can have additional questions, so that's good. So please connect to this short URL .at/FIJ138 link and take the evaluation. 2 minutes should be enough. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we shall be there. I see you very focused. I hope it's the evaluation and not the email you are, you are writing. So, okay, thank you. Last words to our global cluster coordinators. I will ask Marie-Hélène to come in, and then Abdul Majid. So thank you, everyone. The evaluation will be open, and so you can still do it after as well. And also for our colleagues online, please take the evaluation. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Yeah, sorry, I've taken some notes. So first and foremost, thanks to all of you for having come here. These were very insightful and interesting meetings and discussions. Of course, this was my first GPM, so for me it was also a learning curve upwards, of course.
I wouldn't want to pursue without thanking the team for organizing this meeting, the Global Partners meeting. Special thanks to Walter and Angelique, who've been staying nights and over the weekends to work on it, but to the whole team overall. I think I've tried to capture some of the points we've been discussing. These are only a handful number of points, but these are the ones that struck primarily my mind of the things, at least on my responsibility as global coordinator, I would like to spearhead or to put forward the cluster, of course, in coordination with Abdelmajid, who I guess he will have other points as well. So we'll bring them together to make sure that we are on track with what the expectations are for the global cell. I'll call it just the GFSC for being faster. Well, I hope that at least it was, you found it interesting and enlightening. I'd like to thank you also for your contribution on the strategic plan. This is something that for me, having come from Geneva, where all the discussions are very strategic and policy related, of course, I'm bringing that luggage back with me. So it's something that speaks to me, and thereby thanks very much for your contribution and expertise to shape, let's say, and help us coordinate, enhance the coordination at the stage. Not that it's not a good one, but bring it at a higher level, at a different level. I've heard that we want to strengthen partnerships. Point well taken. For me, the important, and I'm talking about myself, I think we need to define what partnerships for the cluster is. Unless we think that the way the partnership is ongoing is fine, then for me, it's fine. I just need to understand what for the cluster partnership is. Principles of partnerships, what do we mean? How do we want to bring forward the partnership? Localization is something else we're going to be looking at through the strategy, but then beyond that, of course. The nexus, the HDPN nexus, and how we can better collaborate with our development colleagues, and thereby better linkages between the HPC and the UNDCF. Sorry to the translators for the acronyms, but don't ask me to spell out UNDCF right now, please. Then I've also gathered that we want to work more on anticipatory action, early warning, and overall preparedness more generally. So that's another homework for us. We need also to identify, let's say, I would say better ways, but maybe that's not the right word, to encourage a multi-sectoral approach. We already started doing that, but this is something that we'll have to strengthen our synergies and our efforts to do that. And last but not least, I think while closing my remarks, I think we've done, you guys, I mean, I just arrived, gone a long way. So I have, there's the cluster over the last 10 years when it was established has gone a long way. We still have things to do that we can't collectively do, but I think we or you should be proud of what we've done so far. Despite the ups and downs and the COVID response, the COVID pandemic, I think we should really look backward and say the impressive work that has been done and what has been established so far. If around the table today we have partners, cluster coordinators sitting there around the table and talking the same language, this is thanks to the effort that was done at the global level, but especially at field level with the mind of sight, the line of sight of the affected population. So for me, it's really kudos of what has been done so far. We definitely has work to do, and I'm bringing myself forward into these new responsibilities. But I think we should also close this 2.5 days, but taking stock that this is, it's a process, and a lot has been done so far. So thanks very much for coming here. Thanks very much for your contributions, for your insightful discussions. I'm bringing a lot back home for me to think over the next coming months of how we could improve, I can improve my role as a coordinator. So thanks very, very much for that. Over to you, Abdelmajid.
No, thank you very much, Mary-Helen, and thank you very much, everyone, especially to the team who organized this very important event, finally face-to-face, that many people were asking for the last 3 years. Some of you may be thinking that there were multiple meetings, 2 meetings in a year, but we thought that it's really important that we have one global level meeting and also have some ad hoc meetings on the basis of requirements quickly to respond some of the situations. And that's what we have done this year. If you participated in the previous one that we have organized on Ukraine. I will not say a lot about these 2.5 days because Mary Helen has covered almost everything, and I'm really thankful to all of you for your active participation in all those sessions. We have a lot of inputs that we need to see how we can utilize those. The clusters, the humanitarian situation, global food security situation, and the outlook for the next year, it's all in front of us because we all are food security and livelihood professionals. So we know that what is happening. This is very important, that what are the thinking at the global level, especially the coordination hub at Geneva. So fortunately now we have an Mary Helen who bring all those experience from that level. And I also bring a lot of coordination experience from the field. My association with the cluster is back to 2005 earthquake response in Pakistan. So it's almost 18 years and different capacities with coordination. And then, working as cluster coordinator as well in quite a few countries. So I think we collectively will be able to see what we have done, what was achieved by our predecessors, and the strategy that we have just concluded. There was some very good results that we have received. Thanks to you again for responding to the questionnaire that we have circulated. And I think these all will really help us to improve. But this doesn't stop here. This cluster is about the partners. Okay. And it's very easy to reach us. You go to the cluster website, you click on about, you go to the cluster team, you will find, if you want to go to any country, you click on the name of the country, you will get all the information that we are producing, and you will get the contexts of our cluster coordinators and information management officers there. You want to see who is at the global team, the right person for the type of information you are looking for, just click on the global team and you will see all the profile there of the people, and you will see that who you really want to link with. I think we have a big leverage. We have close to 70 partners at global level, and you all are leading your organizations in terms of food security and livelihood. At the national level, we have around 1,200 partners globally that are the partners of our national level clusters, so which provided us a very big leverage. Then we have working groups at the global level. We have technical working groups at the field level. We have donors, and I was looking at some of the comments from John that, maybe we were unable to mobilize a lot of donors for this meeting. And that's one area that we really need to see in the future, that how we can make it more workable for our donors to participate as well. But one thing that I'm very happy about is that, donors are participating in our national level meetings. Most of the donors, the countries that where I worked, at least I can see that most of them were present in our national level cluster meeting. So, we really need our partners to work with us if we want to make this cluster more productive for all of us. This changes in the global food security situation demands for working together. So how NGOs can come forward and helping the cluster coordinators to design HNO, the points around the data, the operations, the programming, it's all there. and you are participating in those forums. So you can really help and influence those processes. You can also help and gap analysis by providing the information and also looking at the products that clusters are producing, providing them the feedback on the products that they are producing. So it will really help us to evolve in the changing context of the food security situation globally. You know, they are involved in pool funds. We always try to have end review committees, national and international NGOs to participate in those forums to see that we are accountable, we are transparent, and we are keeping humanitarian principle in front of us when we are making all those decisions on behalf of our humanitarian community. So I think that's what I wanted to say, that we have a huge leverage. We are 1,200 partners across the globe. So let's try to make best use of this cluster to achieve those objectives, to advocate for the people who are facing extreme challenging situations at the field level. With that, once again, I would like to say a big thanks to you, and I hope to see you soon again. Bye.